Welcome, grievers, to another episode of Grieving Voices. This is your host, Victoria, and this week I have a special guest. They're all special because all grievers are special. But this special guest is named Angela, and Angela is an author, a free-range researcher, independent podcaster, and survivor of many horrible things, in her words. And she is from Sydney, Australia. Welcome, Angela. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be talking to you today. Well, difficult, but lovely. Yeah.
I know, it's heavy stuff. And I have thoughts on that moving the podcast forward, actually, how I can bring a little lightness to all the heavy. I think we need a little bit more balance sometimes.
Think of the cactus flowers. They're the thing.
Yeah.
We look in the sharp bits and we find the beauty is hiding there waiting to just pop out. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually where a specific question came from that I came to me today that I will ask you later. So,
okay.
All right. So we just met just now.
Just met. Yep.
Yep. No history here.
I feel like we've clicked though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. That's the thing with grief. It's where we all experience it. All of us on some level. And that's the one thing that nobody can run from. Nobody.
You can try.
You can try.
Yeah.
And that's what the education piece is all about.
Yeah.
In the work that I do. But what I do know is that your story begins when you were 4.
Yeah. Yep. So that's when I started grieving. When I was 4, my father was an alcoholic and he died of hepatic cirrhosis. And so I was 4 years old. My brother was 3 years old. And we found out a lot later that we actually found him at the time, but it was very traumatic. So he died and my mother we had been living with my 2 older brothers who I only met last year for the first time. And they had been raising myself and my brother because my mother wasn't very good at it. So then when he died, she just took us and left. We went to a couple of different places and she was incapable of looking after 2 human beings, but also very, very abusive. So she then told my brother and I for a very long time that our father had died of suicide, and specifically told me any number of times that he'd killed himself because I was a naughty child. So it was, like I started grieving him 40 years ago, and part of grieving him was that gradual awareness as a child that my mother wasn't like other people's mothers. So she died on Halloween last year, and I never really liked my birthdays because they were always really dodgy at home, and she somehow managed to time it so that she committed suicide on Halloween and was then buried on my birthday last year.
No.
So instead of going to the funeral, I made a podcast about the situation. And so I'm now in this really kind of unique situation of grieving this woman who I started grieving 30 years beforehand. So, my father's, I probably told the whole story and you were going to save it up for the whole interview and I spurted it all out in one go. That's where it started and that's where I am now, trying to balance all of the lies that she told me about myself and about my world and who I am, and how to grieve someone when it feels like to grieve someone there has to be a connection, there has to be love or a link there, and it's very, very difficult to work out how to grieve someone when you almost wish they'd never been born, it goes back a long way and it's really all flared up in the last year, but since she died my whole life has changed. It's been remarkable. from the day she died, everything got different. And that's why I decided to do your podcast, to talk to people like me who are going to have to face this really complicated grieving process somewhere along the line. Lots of us are estranged now, and we need to talk about that.
So you mentioned that she kind of plucked you out of the life that you were living. So, and where you were and everything familiar. So it wasn't even just the loss of your father, it was the loss of your whatever support you did have, correct?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. We went from, I've only really found the details of this out in the last couple of years from kind of extended family members who I found gradually through poking at the internet. She just took us away. I was at school, my brother was in preschool, and we just kind of got picked up and moved overnight. She sold my father's house, liquidated all of his assets, left his other children and his first wife with nothing, and then just took us. And then we went through this series of living in tiny, isolated places, like small flats. And we went to stay for a while in this weird Christian commune in the middle of like regional New South Wales, where we all farmed together. We had to leave there after she got really violent with me. And when we left places, it was always bundle everyone into the car, pack everything up, and now we go. And then, so it was this horrible experience of not actually ever learning the basic human things. So like by the time I left school at 16, left home, I didn't have any human skills. All I knew was how to be an abused child. Everything I've made since then has come out of recognizing the strengths I got back there.
so at the time too, when you left at 16 and your brother would have been 15,
Yeah.
was she as equally as abusive to him?
It was weird. It was gendered, very specifically gendered. Women had one job, according to my mother's view of the world, and men had a different job. So my brother was abused, but in different ways. We were both a lot of mine was really weird sexual stuff and emotional abuse and kind of public humiliation and things, but all linked to my sexuality from when I was like a small child. She was offering to sell me to men and to auction off my virginity for a boat at the golf club. And she just thought this stuff was funny. She thought she was the funniest person in the world. And it was 1980s, 1990s Australia. People didn't step in with child abuse. We have a terrible history of what we've done to children in this country and things that have been covered up, institutional child abuse and stuff. And nobody stepped in. People just assumed it was a mother's job. And so many people said to me over the years, a mother wouldn't do that to her daughter, particularly the sexual stuff. Like a mother wouldn't do that to her daughter. So it was I was always just trapped in all of these messages that she was giving me, the really dangerous messages that then the rest of society was not challenging those messages, not interrupting and saying, hey, actually, that's wrong. I am a little bit, my psychiatrist likes to remind me I could have gone to jail for this one, but I once ran up at a woman in the supermarket and slapped her across the head and told her to pick on someone her own size because I'd walked behind her for 3 aisles watching her slap her child across the back of the head every time he reached for something. And I won't just stand by and ignore it because I was that kid that people stood by and ignored. So, she gave me put a firecracker under me, that woman. I had to be, this is where I can read it. Can I just read that bit from my book?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I wrote this book. It's not about promoting this for everyone else. I already told Victoria this. But I wrote this book, and in this book, I talk about, it's called Snakes and Ladders. Wonderful book. But in there, awful, awful book. I lie, it's not wonderful, it's awful. But I survived, spoiler. it includes the horrible things that my mother did to me. And the dedication in this book, I wrote it when I first started writing the book. It says, "To my mother for making me the strongest woman I could be. To my mother for making me the strongest woman I could be." Full stop. That's what you do with it. You take it and you go, this stuff is intolerable. This is unbearable. You cannot live like this. And then you change it. You do something different with it. So I did something so different to what she told me to do. And now it's like right up until the day I've been in therapy for 20 years, okay? 20 years with the same psychiatrist. You can do that in Australia. He's been bulk billing me the whole time. It's free because I'm really broken. You don't normally get that, but I'm pretty broken. He likes me, but you can get free therapy here. It's amazing. I forget where I was going. I started talking about therapy. Does it every time. You can take all of this stuff and make it into something different. And that's where I was going. The day she died, I've been in therapy for 20 years and I thought I'd processed it all. But the day she died, I sat there, and because she died of an overdose, she overdosed. We don't know for sure if it was suicide, but it was a painkiller overdose. And that's what she always said to me from when I was so young. She said, "You're going to die in the gutter with a needle hanging out your arm, Angela." And she said it was going to happen before I was 21. So 21 was a win. I was like, oh, I won that. Then 42, I was like, oh, I got to double what she said. I totally won. But then when she died, the same way she told me I was going to die, it's like something dropped off my gaze and I was able to see how much of everything she ever said about me, she was actually saying about herself. She was talking about herself with all of those things that she said to me. And just that moment of realizing she was finally dead. And that's a whole other story. But realizing she was dead let me just own the truth of myself as a person separate to that abuse, to like really step into being that strong woman that you have to be when you're raised with awful things. You have to be strong or die. And I did. I tried to die with a needle hanging out my arm. I'm obviously better at surviving than she thought I was going to be. I gave it a good red hot go. Heroin is not the way to solve your emotional problems. I can say that 100% confidence. But I've gone somewhere different to what she planned for me. And letting her go is letting that hold over me go. I started my podcast after she died because after years of worrying about talking and being heard in the world, because she would hunt me down everywhere. She never respected my no contact. As soon as I popped up a social media account, she was there. She would send requests through friends and constantly had some illness that I needed to rush to her side and comfort her. So the poor people who had to email me about her finally dying got that response of, "I am so sick of this. No, I am not rushing to her bedside again." And then she was actually dead and all I felt was relief. I'd already processed all the grief. I processed the grief through the book and through the therapy and through making myself into this amazing, strong, capable human being. And I don't regret not having contact with her. I don't regret having kept myself safe. I don't regret prioritizing my safety over her comfort. Oh, have some water after that one.
Wow. And for the audience, it is Dr. Angela Williams, by the way. So it is an incredible story. What's that?
I said I'm comfortable in lecture mode.
Can I ask what doctor? Kind of doctor?
Yes, you can. I actually have a Ph.D. in creative arts. I like to tell people that I'm a doctor of making shit up. I taught critical theory at university for 7 years, which is all of those big ideas we use to think about the world, like philosophy, so the feminism and the socialism and all of the different isms and ologies. I taught a big first year class of around 300 students where we taught them how to do things like think and write essays and paragraphs and sentences, let's be honest. And so I've given a lot of feedback. My favorite subject I ever taught was I was just a tutor for this one. It was a third year research project. So the students got to write like a mini thesis, and I was working with about 90 students, helping them all make their own little mini thesis research project at the end of 3 years of creative arts. So they were across all of the disciplines, visual arts, dance and dramatic and performance and all the rest of them, and including a couple of writers, creative writers, which is my field. They're always the quiet ones they sit in a little clump in the middle of the room, and then the louder students get around them. But yeah, so I spent 7 years wrangling creative arts students to learn how to think while I was writing my PhD, and after I finished my thesis. But my research was into how writing a memoir is like self-surveillance, and we turn the lenses on ourselves to discipline ourselves into being more socially acceptable human beings. Proved that theory, didn't I? Yeah, so that's what my doctorate is in. I think way too much and am overqualified to do everything, but podcast, it turns out. So yes, I'm technically an expert, they tell me. Obviously I am, yes. Can I read you my favourite bit of the book since we're talking about me being a doctor? Here we go.
Sure.
I didn't even write this bit, neither did my publishers. This is by an Australian author called Anna Krine. Sorry, my microphone's there. Oh, this is why I started a podcast. Snakes and Ladders is devastating and brilliant. Williams is a tremendous writer. Her insight into power and punishment is brave, honest, and revealing.
Good.
Thank you, Anna Krine. Yeah, so that's what kind of doctor I am. I'm really good at looking at stories and looking inside them and behind them and underneath them. I did university and therapy at the same time, so I just think all the time.
Okay, pause there. My family is being really loud, and I need to send them a text to shut
yell
the hell
at them.
up.
I'll throw something. None of mine are here. I timed you for when my child is at work and my girlfriend is at work. Yes.
The kitchen is right above, and so my mother is here for overnight for a couple nights. She's my difficult relationship too, by the way. But there's so like creaks of the floor and everything. So hold on here 1 second. And then I want to bring this conversation back to when you were 16 and left home.
Oh yeah.
1 second.
You need a broomstick and you can just bash on the roof with it.
It's ceiling tile. It would go right through.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Someday I'll have like an awesome, amazing studio in my amazing house with a front porch.
Hey, can you do me a favor, since I don't have my note-taking stuff? When you write the bit about where do you find your joy, can you just write superpower next to that in case I forget what I find my joy in? Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh.
Okay. So, okay. There was something else I think it's absolutely incredible how, I mean, you're the epitome of the heroine story.
Yeah.
And can we circle back to when you were 16 and like come back to like the time in between now, like the time in between?
So between 16 and now.
Yeah, like how did you get from a needle in your arm to a PhD, and like how did you quit? Like you just like kicked heroin, like I'm done. Like how?
Um, I'm really smart. I didn't know that when I was a kid. I thought that I was creative, which was an insult in my family. So we went to a Pentecostal church, and I had been reading. My job was to work in the bookshop. That was my volunteering gig. And I read all these books about heroin in the church bookshop. And it took me about 10 years in therapy to realize that what I had done was put those messages together and worked out the consistent thread through all of those books was that when a person started taking heroin, their family stopped talking to them. So she had already been predicting this for me for many years. So I didn't come up with these ideas by myself. But it was a really good escape hatch for me. I used heroin for a few years, got myself in some terrible, terrible trouble, ended up in jail and then back in jail 10 years later for the same thing. But when I left home, I found a place to live and she came there and saw me. So then I moved further away into the city, right into the city, and she came and found me. And so I ended up I lived homeless on the streets of Sydney for about 9 months. I was at the time, I was like, I'm pretty sure there's a private investigator following me. And then my friends were like, you're paranoid, Angela, that's the drugs. Found out years later that my auntie actually had paid a private investigator to try and find me.
Oh wow.
And so I did have a private investigator following me. For brief periods there. I had to make myself so unpalatable to my mother. She went through this period of every time she saw me, she would give me money for heroin and would try and go and buy it for me, offered to shoot me up one day because my hands were shaking too much. It was kind of like Munchausen's by proxy. She really liked having a broken child. When I was a kid, she used to feed me toothpaste, so I would have a fever and go to the hospital. So by the time I left home, like it took me about a year and a half to get her to leave me alone. And then I met this man um, and he convinced me that he was going to rescue me and we were going to get married. I was 17, he was 26. He's the father of my child. So he convinced me that my parents needed to be involved in this. So they came and met his family and it got really weird. And then it turned out he was abusive because like part of what you do when you've had abusive parents is you go and find a bunch more to keep that abuse going, don't you? So I actually have had, I think my next book will be about how many relationships I fucked up on the way to having one that actually works. But yeah, I had a child. I was spiraling out of control and I got so sick that I actually genuinely don't know how I'm alive. I weighed like 36 kilos. You guys can convert that to pounds yourself. And I had like these big cracked sores on the corner of my mouth where every time I talked, pus would run down my face. And I really like to talk. So I got really, really sick. And then I went to rehab because that's what you do. And I did 12 months in rehab and my first therapy while I was there. And I started thinking and I started putting things together. And the first 3 months I was in rehab, you weren't allowed to talk to your family. That was one of the rules. And then I got through 12 weeks and then my mother rang me and I stood there and I had not wanted to use heroin. I was going through the program. I was loving it. I was enjoying being clean. And then I heard a voice on the phone and I wanted to use again. And I was like, this is. And then I said, no, I can't have any contact with you. And then about 6 weeks later, a social worker turned up at the rehab and told me my mother was dying in hospital and that I needed to go and make my peace with her. And that was in 1997. So that was the first time she got me out of the no contact thing. And then I refused to play by the rules I'd been given. So she took my son to live with her and then handed him over to my brother. And can we not air that bit? Can we not air the bit about my brother? So she took my son and put him in foster care, and I didn't see him for 7 years. The police wouldn't let me file a missing persons report because he was with a family member. And so in that 7 years, I tried to kill myself really hard with other drugs, not just heroin. I made my track marks into a work of beauty. You can use them as little soup bowls. And then I went, no, I said, this is not working for me. So I attempted suicide, which was kind of in my genes as well when you look at it, how I was raised. But then my suicide attempt failed. And while I was in hospital, the doctor who assessed me was my psychiatrist. And how I still see him to today. He was the magic thing. I had just applied to go to university, and I have then spent 20 years telling this man these stories about myself, and he just gives me constant positive regard. He likes me no matter what. And 20 years of therapy and 13 years at university, and the two combined to just, I can see so clearly how my teenage years were just like those years after I left home. Those were the only options I had. I didn't know how to open a bank account. I didn't know any of the basics of like economy, of how the economy works, how politics works, how to engage with the world, how to get a job, how to do anything. And so I spent 20 years being my own parent, in therapy, giving myself all the things that my mother hadn't given me to make myself into a human being. And I think I probably technically hit like human being around about 26 or 27 before I was actually able to see myself as being the same kind of creature as the people around me. Now I am 100% convinced I am a human being, but took a long time and a lot of therapy. He charges $360 an hour to people who aren't being bulk billed. Oh, I am so privileged. This man, he changed my life forever.
He believes in you.
Oh, yeah,
He believed in
absolutely.
you.
He is the captain of my fan club. Yeah.
Sounds like an amazing guy.
He is. Oh, but
Perhaps
he
the
knows
father
that.
figure you've never had.
Well, yes, and absolutely the father figure I never had, but also a kind of representation of society, because the school ignored the abuse, the church ignored the abuse, our docs, the community services, they got sent out to see us. They saw me at the school and then went back home and told my mother what I said about her. So all of society was just saying, this is okay. Shrinkola, my psychiatrist, he was the first person who said, actually, no, this isn't okay. Like there was a moment where I was telling him this story about how my grandmother said that if I could get a recording of my mother abusing me, then she would go to the police with me. And I was telling my psychiatrist this as evidence that my grandmother was my hero. And he was like, hang on, Angela. If she was like, what adult asks a child to provide a recording of them being abused before they will believe you and take action on it? Yeah, he was the first person who ever said, actually, yeah, no, this is not okay. And I needed to hear that. Yeah.
In grief recovery, we talk a lot about, I'm a grief recovery specialist, and we talk a lot about beliefs and what, was your, I don't know if this is okay to ask, so if it's not, just let me know, but do you know if your mother was abused as well growing up?
Okay, so this is totally intergenerational. This has happened a lot in Australia. We've actually just put the story together in the last See, for 4 months before my mother died, my auntie died. Well, 3.5 months before my mother died, my auntie died. And my auntie had been her younger sister and had been the victim of her abuse growing up. My mother and my grandmother used to team up on my sister and her younger brother, who died of suicide, would you believe?
Oh my gosh.
So Auntie Les died last year in August, September. And then my mother died in October. But in between, we found this briefcase that Auntie Les had sitting for years. And she would say to my uncle, don't worry about that. That's stuff for the kids. And she was kind of like my stand-in mother. I lost contact with her. She tried to kidnap me when I was 11 after my mother broke a fry pan on my head. And so then we didn't see them again until I was an adult and I found her myself. So Auntie Les had kept this suitcase, this briefcase. So the way the story goes, we put all the documents together. My grandfather was in the Navy and he went off to World War II and he met my grandmother. And so he went off to World War II, was on a boat. They accidentally told him my grandmother was at home pregnant with my oldest auntie. And they accidentally told my grandfather that she was dead. Her and the baby had died. And so then he ceased all contact with her back in Australia. And at the same time, the Navy decided the way to treat his grief was to feed him heaps of rum and put him in an officer training program. And then because of, all those screw ups that happened in World War II, he didn't come back to Australia for 5 years. And he lived as an officer in the Navy, drinking heaps of rum and constantly reporting back to the medics that he wasn't coping with this, while at home, my grandmother was going mad because her brand new husband had deserted her and left her at home with this baby. So we're pretty sure that something broke in the family then. They went on to have 3 more children, and my mother was the eldest of those 3 children. So my grandmother was a nasty woman, and everybody agreed with that. She was nasty to her children, and she taught my mother her unique brand of nastiness. So it wasn't, my mother would tell you she was abused by everyone. Everyone abused her. My stepfather abused her. My father abused her. My grandmother abused her. The people who were victims of my mother tell it very differently. So something broke in our family in World War II. We've got all of this in my grandparents' own handwriting. My grandfather's written this to the Veterans Affairs, trying to get recognition of what was done to the family. But I think something broke back then. And so then they came back to Australia, and Australia had we have made torturing children a tradition here. We routinely dig up backyards in the inner west of Sydney where there are multiple baby skeletons buried around, because you could make money at certain stages of Sydney's history by, we call them the baby farmers. They would take babies on to look after them or to rehouse them and then just kill them and bury them in the backyard. We had orphanages set up just to bring homeless, destitute children from the UK and the US to Australia to farm them out for profit. And this is like 100 years ago.
Oh my God.
150 years ago. So we had a really bad history of child abuse in Australia that was ignored on every level. So it's kind of filtered down to, it is ridiculous how many friends I have with such similar stories of mothers like mine, like down to really ridiculous. I have one friend, and we both had the same identical experience of being made to paint ceilings in our house in the 1 at 2 o'clock in the morning, standing on tables whilst being beaten with broomsticks. That is such a precise. It's like we taught women in this country, mothers in this country, how to abuse children. I can understand why she was the woman she was, but I can't forgive it. But luckily, it turns out that forgiveness isn't as necessary as they make out. Yeah, so there was something broken in the whole family. And my grandfather was one of the first people to get off the boats and set foot at Hiroshima after the things. Did you know we let Navy officials just get off and wander around there after the bombs went off without any PPE. Whoa. And then his hair was falling out and he was bleeding from his rectum for the rest of his life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll do something with that suitcase full of records, write a book about it. But there's we can always, you look at society, you look at any level of society, you can find something there that is guaranteed to turn a person into a monster. But at the same time, we have to look at the monsters and go, it doesn't make it okay to be a monster. I should have been a monster. I should have been. Myra Hindley, the serial killer, the Moors murderer, had such a similar upbringing to me. I should have been Myra Hindley. But instead, I did therapy, wrote about my stuff, changed my life, and now I'm a beacon for good. We don't have to live out the histories that we're given.
It takes people like you to break that cycle, to break the pattern of that generational learning. Because,
Yeah.
like, imagine then if you hadn't, how would your relationship be with your son? How would your son be, you know?
Well, my son came back out of foster care to live with me when he was 11. Apparently, that never happened. So we talk about it. He was officially put back into my care when he was 16. I took him back from the state. I was like, give me back those papers, which apparently, again, never happens. But he lives with me now. He's an adult, 26. We have the best relationship in the world. He has been very slow about getting any relationships, and there's damage there that comes from having a family like mine, but we did something different. He's my hero. Would you like to see a picture of him from the book?
I would love to.
Oh, he's amazing. His name is Finn. I called him Dex in the book. He got to choose his own name. There he is.
Oh.
That's when he was little. And there he is with me and him being all cool. Oh, and there's my boobs. Look, I covered my boobs. There you go.
I'm going to have to check out this book.
Oh, do, but you don't get the pictures in the e-edition. People have been very disappointed about that. It's a very good book. Lovely. Yeah.
I like a book in my hands.
Pardon? Yeah, me
I like
too.
a book in my hands.
To sniff them. Oh, you can't sniff an e-book.
You can't doggy ear. You can't write and take
post-it notes. Where do you put your post-it notes?
I know.
Oh.
So let me ask you this. Among all the chaos and the trauma and abuse and where did you find your joy? Where did you find joy?
So
how long did that take too?
Oh, that's a good question. Funnily, my middle name is Joy, Angela Joy, because I'm an angel of joy. Yeah, I don't know where she was going with that one, but I found my joy by recognizing my superpowers. Complex trauma has an effect on the structure of your brain, particularly complex trauma with really young people. So your brain wires differently to normal people, and it gives you some things that, like when we talk about pathologies, they kind of describe these as symptoms, but I prefer to think about them as superpowers. So it was a really slow process going to university and realizing that I was very good at critical thinking. I can put a very sound argument together. I can read some very disparate different sources and bring them together to make a whole. And it took me a very long time to realize that that was because I was smart. I had been creative was the insult. It took me a really long time to realize that I was smart. Once I started to let myself relax into that, studying and learning and writing and creating is where I find my joy. It's I've won a couple of awards for the book where I got to, before it was published, I got to go and stay in this amazing writer's retreat up in the Blue Mountains just above Sydney. And one day I wrote like 22,000 words in one day. I was just that from like 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up just with the flow burning in me and just wrote. That's where I found my joy. I found my joy in, it's not quite retelling, it's reimagining every story I come up against. I challenge it and I think about all the different angles. And that's why I started my podcast, so I could just share this stuff with the world. I usually just share it with my Facebook, and people are like, Angela, you need to talk to other people about this. I've done some conferences, a couple of appearances, and I love taking the bad stuff and making it into something good, being able to find those cactus flowers. When the editors of my book first read it, they were like, this is an amazing book. There is a wonderful story. We just need you to find some of the more pretty bits. We need you to find the joy in there and bring it out, because it's a very heavy book to read otherwise. And so I'd gotten addicted to this kind of flow activity of learning and reading and synthesizing information before I realized that I was enjoying it. So I was at university getting those really good marks and spending 80 hours a week reading and researching and writing, and then never making the connection that the really good marks I was getting and the fact that I was happily and willingly spending all of these hours reading things that other people were very resistant to reading, that's where I get my joy and my flow. It's the superpower of part of the brain damage that's inflicted on you as an abused child is hyper-awareness. You have to watch for everything. You have to read the tiny, tiny details, because that's what keeps you alive. I took hyper-awareness and made it into a craft, an art form, a skill that I can use to make myself stronger. And that's it. That's where I found my joy, in flipping all of the narratives and all of the stories I was ever given and turn it upside down, look underneath, find out the other version of the story, and then do that instead. Yeah. And the superpower theory has only really formed over the last 5 years or so, when I got quite heavily into researching cortisol and neuro-linguistic. I'm not doing NLP. I think it works, but I'm not doing it. But once I started researching how brain chemistry fits together, I realized that, I get way too excited about research. So I just let myself do it now. Freelance researcher. I am not affiliated with the university. I am considering a current research arrangement that might let me stick my nose into corrective services, but mostly I just do it for my fun.
Was it your therapist that encouraged you to apply for university?
No, it was not my therapist. It was, he encouraged me to apply for university, but I'd already kind of started the process before I met him. I was flirting with the idea. I used to take a lot of drugs. I know I don't seem the sort, do I? But for a very long time, or maybe it just seems longer because I was on drugs, I would have these conversations with people under pool tables, in the toilets at the pub, at the bus stop, and they'd be like, you should go to university, Angela. So lots of people said it. And then I met this guy. I was 26. He was 16. There was nothing romantic. He's gay. We're BFFs. He lives in Canada. But he started going to university and we were hanging out quite a bit. There was drugs involved. He started going to university and he was like, honestly, sorry, Chris, I know you're listening, not very smart. So I was like, well, if he's going to university, surely I can go to university, right? And so he made me drive with him to Wollongong University, just south of Sydney. And I was like, oh, this is pretty nice, isn't it? And then I watched him, you had to put your form in person back then. I watched him put his form in and I was like, by the time he got back to the car, I was like, dude, I'm going to go to university. He was like, I think you should. And I didn't know you could get scholarships because I hadn't done year 12, the end of school, our HSC we call it. I didn't know you could get scholarships to pay for the bridging course. So I was working in the sex industry. So I just went to work and stayed at work until I made enough money to pay for that course so I could get in and go to university. I was just determined to go. And then I worked in the sex industry the whole way through university to pay my way there, which is legal in New South Wales. And we pay tax and things. It's excellent. And by the time I finished my second degree at university, I was just hooked. I just stayed there until they started paying me to be at university. And then I got so involved and I saw the back end of university and I went, oh, I don't want to work for you people anymore. I'm just going to go and think for myself now. Yeah, so it was Christopher's fault. He's the reason I went to university. He's just upstairs from you in Canada. Give him a poke with the stick.
There's so many layers to you. Like it's just
I know.
What's the next chapter?
I've met this woman. I've had lots of very awful relationships in my time. And I've met this woman and she's pretty excellent. We've been together for coming up on 2 years now and our families like each other. And her mother gave me a card at Christmas time for my birthday right before Christmas that said, to my daughter-in-law. So we figure she's dropping some pretty heavy hints there. Yeah, we are talking about going bush. We're going to go and live in a tiny town and grow vegetables, except for when there's a drought, then we'll just eat dirt and stuff because we're Australian. She started a business. I've got a couple of different things I do. I'm writing another book, of course. Actually, that's a lie. I am writing 6 different books at the moment. So I should probably focus in a bit, pull my energies towards just one of them for a while. Yeah, I'm just relaxing. I'm 44. I'm pretty sure that I've started menopause. I'm going to see the doctor about that on Thursday. I'd really like to just relax and enjoy the second half of my life. I want this thing to go away. My girlfriend,
I got that too.
Yeah, my son's name is Finn. I told him it's my Finkel.
These are my, like the number 11. I got, the number 11 lines. Are you effing kidding me lines?
Well, I think I've done it so much mine's squashed into one. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I am. I'm a bundle of contradictions. My podcast, I go 20 minutes Monday to Friday. And
wow. What's it called? What's your podcast?
Oh, my podcast is called Deboning Power. I like to stick my knife into things. I make terrible puns and I can't stop myself. So I talk about New South Wales and Australian politics. I bust a lot of spin there. But then at the same time, I have at least once a week, I do one on getting better, the therapy stuff, bottling all of that amazing therapy I've had and just trying to spit it at the internet. Oops, sorry, microphone. And on Mondays, I talk about kink, BDSM. I'm a bit of a community leader, so I educate people about how to do things safely. It's all a good combination. Power just pretty much covers everything, doesn't it? You talk about power, you can talk about anything you want. Yeah, I ask difficult questions. I'm very good at reading media and I really dislike my politicians. So I have to tell them that frequently. Yeah. But my therapy ones are my most popular. No, that's a lie. People love the kink ones. They get very excited about those, but the therapy are the second most popular episodes. Yeah. The politics is just what I do for fun.
I love this interview because it's going from heavy to light to just so many spectrums of the human experience that, do you feel like you've lived like 3 lifetimes?
Oh yeah, totally. Wait a minute, I know I wrote this bio. Yeah, no, it's in my bio. It says, where are you, bio? Come back here. Oh, they moved it on me. It says that I've lived way more lives than by 20. I'd lived more lives than anyone should have. But that was it, right? Because my mother didn't teach me how to be a human. So I had to learn for myself. And all of the predictions she made for me, she told me I'd end up in sex work. So I went into sex work and became an incredibly successful, professional dominatrix. She told me I was going to die from using heroin. So I used heroin and instead used it as a tool to escape and to get away from her. And she told me that I was creative and that meant that everything I said was a lie. And instead I became a writer and became very well equipped at just speaking truth. Truth is what I do better than anything. And this for a podcast about grieving, this is so important because I've grieved my auntie this year and my stepfather in a much more complicated way. But everything I've made of my life, every single weird thing that I've stuck my finger into has been in response to my grief for not having a mother, not having that central cohesive, because she was there, but she wasn't a mother. So that's everything I've done. My psychiatrist, my sex work, my education, it's all been about mothering myself, giving myself the things that she wasn't giving me. And the thing that's been hardest about her actually dying was how much relief I felt and how uncomfortable I felt saying that to other people. I could tell my girlfriend and my psychiatrist, but it's really hard with most people to say, yes, my mother just died and I feel absolute relief. Over the years, lots of people have said, you need to make your peace with her because you'll regret it when she's dead. Everything I've done has been me making my peace with her. And I didn't realize how efficiently I'd already grieved her. I didn't realize how making myself into the opposite of what she thought I was going to be was, it was a gift I was giving myself, because that's all grief is, isn't it? They don't know we're grieving them. They're gone. All of our grief is something that we give ourselves. It is for some people it's soothing, for other people it's relief, and it's about us though, not them. And yeah, I couldn't go to the funeral. I couldn't. My brother went. She changed her name after the court said that she wasn't legally allowed to have access to my son, because she tried to get him removed from my care and put in foster care up near where she lived so she could see him up there. And I'm like, no, that's not happening. And I, in exchange, asked for an order saying that she'd never be allowed to see him again while he was a child. So she changed her name after that. And so I would have had to turn up to a funeral with all these people from her church who had become, her church was very important to her. And I couldn't have my truth there. I couldn't perform the grief that they would expect me to perform. And I couldn't fake it. If I walked into there, I would not call her by her name that she took to avoid police finding out she was talking to children. I'm too honest. I couldn't do it. And every single funeral that I've been to, my auntie chose not to have a funeral. We got drunk on her river and sent her ashes out there, all happily and celebrating under her tree where we fished together for years. I couldn't give my mother that. I couldn't. Did a podcast instead, talked about it. Yeah.
Maybe a podcast about a eulogy that you would have liked to have written.
Oh, well, I tried that, right? I was going to give her a eulogy, and instead I just ranted about how horrible it was that she decided to get buried on my birthday. Because, I do my podcasts every day. So some of them get quite a lot of research. Some are just, I am yelling at you today, internet, and that's okay. When you do it every day, they can't all be amazing. But that one was quite amazing. It was very raw. I didn't want to give her a eulogy. She left a stack of notebooks, a stack of them, and my brother burnt them. I asked him to, because we knew that all that would be in there would be pages and pages and pages of explanations for why she was a victim in the world and everyone was out to get her. And I've had the letters sent to me, pages saying, if you don't respond to now, I'm cutting you out of the will. I got cut out of the will the first time when I was 14. So it's like, you can't keep holding that thread over me forever. And it turned out there was no will, so, or anything to leave. So, yeah.
But the truth, how you saw it, that people close to her probably never did,
No, no.
you know?
My brother asked if I wanted if I wanted him to say anything. I said, tell them to read my book. I said, that's my truth. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah. Because that's it. I mourned them. I said goodbye to them by writing that book. I had to find some kind of sympathy for them in writing, and that empathy that you have to have for your characters, even when you know they're people who've abused you. I found a whole new level of understanding for my mother in writing that book and who she is as was as a person. But the only reason I would have turned up to that funeral was to make the other people there feel better about it. Yeah, I felt more guilty about being the empty seat in the pew than missing saying goodbye to my mother. But I've cried over it too many times. Every time I cried myself to sleep after a beating, those were the tears that should have been at the funeral. And like I said to her when she tried to ask me if she could move in with me a couple of like last year sometime, I said, if you want to have children who are going to look after you in your old age, you have to skill your children up as human beings before they leave home. You can't abuse someone for most of their life and then say, well, now it's your turn to look after me. Yeah, can't, you just can't do that. Yeah, yeah.
so she is the epitome of a narcissist too.
Oh, yeah, 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 absolutely, top to bottom. Yeah, and a prescription pill addict. So, had lots of doctors treating her for lots of different illnesses and all kind of prescribing, yeah, medication for different things. And she would self-diagnose and then go to a doctor and tell them that someone else had diagnosed her with that thing. And then, yeah, yeah.
And coming back to what you were talking about with like how other people would say that you need to make peace with her, you'll
Mm,
regret it. It's like what people don't understand is like in grief recovery, oftentimes the people that give us the most grief are people who are living.
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, when they say that, they're projecting their own experiences onto other people as well. If you've grown up with loving, supportive parents, it is very, very hard to
Mm-hmm.
conceptualize. Like it's equally hard for me to conceptualize loving, supportive parents. You can't just assume everyone else has had the same experience as you. And when people say that to you, when they say, well, you'll regret this after they're gone, what they're actually doing is trying to place this responsibility on you to value your blood connections over your own safety and security. If someone has just told you that they've been terribly abused by someone, and you turn around by saying, well, you need to stay in touch with them, you need to have, they're your mother, you have to have that connection. What you're actually doing is telling them that all the stuff that that person has done to them matters less than their safety. No, sorry, matters more than their safety. It's And grief is so difficult. We need to know two people will grieve the same way. And it's been really strange talking to my brother about this because we've had a very difficult relationship because we were co-victims, victim bonded. Um, and then talking to our kids about it. He has 5 kids and I have 1 kid, and we talk to them about stuff, particularly stuff with suicide, because my brother has 4 girls, my cousin has 3 girls. We talk about the suicide stuff because not talking about it is more dangerous than talking about it. My father's suicide was not real, so I don't count that in the tally anymore. But apart from my father, I've lost half of my mother's generation to suicide. And that's enough. That's enough. Yeah. Yeah. So we talk to the kids and we talk about the abuse and we talk about what it means. And we talk about suicide. Yeah. And the risks. Yeah. Because that's it, right? You know, when you live with this risk, I can be reasonably certain I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, one of the most likely ways I will die is from suicide. That's just the reality of it, of my illness and my history and my baggage. So I kind of live around that risk, knowing that, yeah, and I suppose my mother's done it now, so that's even more likely, isn't it? That pushes me into a even further into a risk category, and that was one of my biggest concerns over the period where she was being buried. It was my birthday, which the last time I saw her on my birthday, she sexually assaulted me in front of a big group of people and made a joke out of it. And
Oh gosh.
yeah, yeah. So I was in a real risky place around that week, but I just did what I do. I talked to my psychiatrist, I talked to my girlfriend, and kept myself safe. Yeah, that got dark, didn't it?
Oh.
It's okay. Hey,
You're
yeah,
talking to me. You're here.
I know. I
You
know
turned your
because I
life
win.
around.
So many times over the last 10 years, I've just stopped and yelled at the sky, I win. I did so different to what I was told to do. I
And
became so.
that whole suicide narrative, that doesn't have to be your story. You
I
don't
know.
have to live into that story.
Yeah, but we have to
So
talk
it's
about it. Hey, we have to.
exactly as
Yeah,
much as you talked, and I'm sure your therapist,
yeah.
i.e., your
Oh, that.
father figure,
Yeah, yeah. In
is
Australia, we're as scared of talking about suicide as we are of talking about child abuse. We have renamed World Suicide Prevention Day is now called Are You OK Day.
shut
And
up.
no, it is. And instead of talking about suicide, people say, Are you okay? To all their friends, and everyone wears a badge on that day. And then we don't have to talk about it the rest of the year. And our Prime Minister has just hired a woman, one of his marketing buddies, she is revolutionizing the suicide prevention space in Australia she's making a program where we're going to identify people who might be at risk of suicide and then offer them support and counseling, but without bringing up the topic of suicide. So we're going to typecast people, go up and have conversations with them where we just all of a sudden look really positive and cheerful, and I'm sure we'll say, "Are you okay?" But we're not ever going to mention the word suicide. So yeah, I respond to my environment, and this country is a bit toxic in some ways. So
A
yeah, I
better
talk
line
about.
would be, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, I've been every year. I've I get a bit activist around Are You OK Day, and I like to yell things like, "Why isn't it okay for me to say I'm not okay?" Yeah, and this year it was. Oh, sorry, last year, 2020. Do you guys have Kit Kats over there?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Do they have the have a break, have a Kit Kat
Yeah.
advertising campaign?
Yeah.
Guess who sponsored Are You OK Day in 2020? Kit Kat.
Really.
Are you okay? Have a break, have a Kit Kat.
Like that's
Oh.
anything related.
Yeah, someone in a marketing room thought they were an absolute genius coming up with that sponsorship campaign.
Let's
I
make
found it.
suicide talk clever.
Yeah, yeah, here, have a Kit Kat instead of killing yourself.
Oh my
But we
God.
want to talk about it without talking about suicide. So yeah, yeah, it's one of my topics. Mm.
Yeah, bring that to the forefront
Oh,
more
I do.
regularly. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I'm a bit of
Wow.
an activist in the circle. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Lightbringer.
Well, truth speaker. Brutal, unflinching honesty is my brand. Yeah. I say the things that other people are just too uncomfortable to say.
So let me look here. What would you like to scream to the world and wish people knew about your grief?
I did write something for that, didn't I?
And I think it comes
I would
back
like,
to just
yeah.
that you don't always have a loving relationship.
Yes. Oh, right. I already said that. No, yes, that is the thing. The thing I would like to scream to the world is that not everyone has a loving relationship with the person they're grieving. And we need to make space for people who don't. We're in Australia, there's a fly. There, not everyone is going to mourn with sadness and tears. The shock on some people's faces when I said, my mother died. They said, how are you? I said, I feel relief. Um, need to make room for people to feel relief. We need to welcome these kind of stories of grieving that challenge the norm and challenge the stereotypes, because lots of people have come to me over the years and asked for my support with going no contact with abusers. Um, there's a lot of people out here living this truth. And the reason I'm talking about this as much as I am right now is just to say to all of them, you're not necessarily going to regret it. You're not. We don't all grieve the same way, and we don't all love the same way, and we weren't all raised the same way. We have to give each other room for the differences.
Because we're all unique and every relationship is unique. And just like you kind of brought up a little bit earlier, like you and your brother lived in the same household with the same person, but your experiences, you'll see it from your own unique perspective and you won't
Yeah.
grieve the same. You
No,
just won't.
no.
So it's coming from a place of understanding and compassion.
Absolutely compassion. We need to just be more gentle on each other. We're also willing to tell each other what's wrong with the other person, but much less willing to look at ourselves. It's the biggest value I've had of therapy. Every 2 weeks, I spend an hour fact checking my reality and identifying when I have fucked up and when something is my fault and when I have contributed to something, and then changing that.
What does that look like? What is that process for you?
Oh, I'm big on accountability and honesty, and I screw up all the time. It's for me that it's hard. It's hard to realize that you've done something wrong, or that you've been an idiot, or that you haven't noticed something harmful you've done to another person. I did a really good podcast recently about shame and secrets and about how we talk about them. And I think for me, a big part of living so honestly is learning to also cope with shame, deal with shame, acknowledge shame, own your shame. It's the feeling that we run away from the most is shame. And I know that my feeling of not wanting to leave that empty seat at my mother's funeral was linked to my shame of never having been a good enough daughter for her, never having. And I've carried that shame for so long, but it's still something that I need to check again and again and again. And it's stuff that it's so easy to project onto other people. Yeah. Now my
This is
family's
like
come home. Yeah.
this is like the third time the word shame has come up today for
Yeah.
me. Like in just
Really?
yeah. And so that's actually where I was kind of going, and how shame is very much tied to grief.
Oh,
And
yeah.
because, we may feel guilty about something, it's these conflicting feelings
Mm.
of I should feel this way, but I really feel that way. I
Yep.
want to feel this way, but I have this weight of shame.
Yep.
And that blocks us from the ability to be intimate with
Mm.
ourselves, like to really look at ourselves, to
Yep.
really connect with other people.
Yep. Well, shame is such an uncomfortable feeling. It is. it's prickly and horrible. It's when our chest gets warm and our throat gets warm and our face gets warm. And most people will never even recognize that they're feeling shame, in my opinion. I think a lot of us flip it instantly into fear or disgust or anger or rage to avoid having to feel shame. And I think that people like myself, like my mother, who blamed everything outwards, that's about doing anything possible to avoid having to come close to that shame. And what you're saying is true. It blocks you from any kind of intimacy with yourself or with other people, because when you're 100% doing everything you can to avoid feeling shame, you never give yourself the space to connect realistically with people, because everything is about protecting yourself from shame. And it means that when you need to be accountable to someone, if you're doing everything you can to avoid the shame, all you're going to do is put up a wall between you and that person. And that usually that wall is really frequently blame. It's your fault. You did this to me. You made me do this. And as soon as we put the word you in there, we're pushing our shame away, putting it onto another person and saying, this is yours. It's so much harder to just say, I'm really sorry I did this, and I can see how awful it's been for you. And then just stop talking.
Be honest, right? And that's
Yeah.
honesty is
Yeah.
the drug is the wrong word. Antidote.
Oh, that's a good one.
Antidote for
Yes.
shame.
It
Honesty is the
is.
antidote for shame.
It
I
is.
gotta
It
write that
is.
down.
Do it. Do it. I think I might have said something similar in my shame one. People message me all the time to say they've read that one. I mean, listen to that one. It's amazing. We need to talk about shame more.
And the word grief.
Mm.
And the word suicide.
Oh, yes. And how they all layer together. Um, I've spent so much of my life thinking that if I could just be a bit more something, then I'd be the kind of person my mother could love. And my first suicide attempt when I was really young came as a reaction to feeling that I would never match up to that. And my last suicide attempt came from me feeling that I would never match up to that. And that feeling that I would never match up to it, that is shame. That's absolutely shame that's been kind of smeared onto me. But I never did anything wrong. I didn't actually have anything to be ashamed of there. There was no way that I could have made that woman love me no matter what I did.
And then here's the thing. She
mm,
wasn't there when she wasn't there for you to
yeah.
even blame. And even if
Yeah.
you wanted to blame her, she would
Yeah.
turn it around and spin it on you. So that's where
Absolutely.
that self-destructive behavior, if people aren't able to communicate and get that out, like
Mm.
just even speak it.
But the other thing is, right, that shame, I can see that shame now and know that it's not my shame. But before I
Right.
could do that, I had to feel that shame and process it and think about it in all of its deeper layers. So when I first met that shame, it was my shame because I hadn't looked at it enough to know that it wasn't. And so when you can identify shame that has been smeared on you from outside like that, then you can step back from it and go, no, I don't own it. It's not my shame. But you've got to go through the process of feeling it first. And so a lot of things that people turn into more dangerous emotion, well, toxic emotions like anger and rage is things, and blame was something where if they just sat with the shame, sat with the feeling and thought about what it said about them, it might have been that they'd done something that they needed to apologize and be accountable for, or it might have been that they were carrying some baggage that had been smeared on them from outside. But by refusing to feel the shame through that uncomfortable bit and think about it, they've lost the ability to, it becomes their shame then no matter where it comes from, because they can't look at it long enough to categorize it, sort it into its basket. Shame is toxic. I'm pretty sure that shame is linked to the majority of suicides that happen. And I can see my mother's as a direct result of her own shame. It had finally gotten to the stage where she couldn't keep spinning games to people. But that was her shame, not mine. Mm.
I believe the root of shame is grief.
Yeah.
I believe grief
Yeah.
is at the root of a
I
lot of
think,
dis-ease.
yeah. And we haven't, I think we're carrying a lot of kind of societal and cultural grief as well. Some of the things that we've seen humanity being capable of in the last 100 or so years. Well, I mean, before that as well. But you look at things like World War II and the impact it had on my family. We all kind of, we have a lot of shame that's spread around. And it is about grieving. It's about when you feel shame, you're grieving something in yourself. We don't only grieve deaths, we grieve losses as well. Yeah. And
Well,
people feel
grief,
so much shame about grieving. Like we're supposed to bounce back. We're supposed to be able to deal with it. We're supposed to, yeah.
yeah, I could talk all day about grief.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
it's really the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations, and anything we wish would have been different, better, or more. And so
Yeah,
when you think of grief in that way, that's why I say everyone, every single one of us has grieved something.
yeah. Or we're putting off grief till later. We've got something we should have grieved or we need to grieve and we're saving that up for ourselves to do some other time. That's what I
Oh,
was
but we're
doing with the
dealing with
heroin.
it. We're
Yeah,
dealing
yeah,
with it in
yeah,
some way.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what? If you're
yeah,
turning to the bottle, if you're turning to sex, if you're turning to gambling, you're turning to
yeah.
porn, you're turning to shopping, you're addressing it
Well, yeah, I
with a
actually did a
band-aid.
podcast on I did a podcast on this yesterday where I was talking about endorphins and pain and how endorphins work just they're your brain's natural heroin. So when you're doing things that give you an adrenaline rush, basically all you're doing is getting your brain to shoot out its own heroin. And that works for emotions as well as for like physical pain. So, yeah, the great eraser is what they call alcohol in the AA movement, the great eraser. And it's just, you're not dealing with it. You're just kind of putting a cap on it and hoping it'll stay there for a while, but you can't. Those caps don't hold. They got to come off eventually. Yeah.
Well, in a grief recovery, we equate it to picture yourself as a tea kettle,
Mm,
and you
yeah.
either implode or you explode.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And that bit in between, you're going to be spitting stuff in every
Yeah.
direction. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So
Mm. Mm.
I'm assuming it was your therapist who was the most supportive of you. What did you find was most helpful to you? And
Space.
as you started to navigate everything, space.
Yes, space. When I first got the email saying that they needed me to call about my mother, I I hoped she was dead after all the times that she'd kind of used that as a tool. But I couldn't let myself hope because it had happened a lot before. But I also couldn't. It's really difficult to say to a person who is ringing you to say your mother's in hospital, you need to come and see her, to say, no, I'm not doing this again. So I rang my brother and said, I think, can you call this person? I think something's gone wrong with our mother. And that was the best thing I did, asking him to do that for me. I couldn't have done it a year ago. We drove to my auntie's for her funeral together. It was the longest we'd spent alone together since we were children. So I called him and asked him to take that. And then in the bit in between me saying that to him and him ringing back to tell me that she was dead, my beautiful girlfriend I didn't cry. It was really, I felt shame about not crying, but I just kind of sat there with it kind of gradually dawning on me that maybe this time she actually was dead. And And then I had 4 or 5 days of just, it was like I was a startled cat constantly. It was really bad timing. The jacaranda trees were out, and they triggered off some really bad stuff from my 16th birthday. So traditionally, my entire life, every single time I've seen a jacaranda tree, I've had this moment of being triggered back into my 16th birthday. And day after she died, I went out driving with my girlfriend and I saw a jacaranda tree and I just had this moment of lightness in my heart. So it took me a couple of days to actually believe that it was real this time, that I wasn't going to open my email or my messenger to a big long message or lots of messages from people she'd messaged about me. But I took that space. My girlfriend just sat on the lounge next to me and held my hand, and she just kept saying to me, I'm here, like whatever you need, I'm here. But I suppose I'd gotten in practice. When Auntie Les died in September, I grieved really hard. I cried on the floor in the kitchen for hours. And I cried on the floor in the bathroom, and all the places with tiles. Let's go and cry there. But I couldn't cry over my mother. I couldn't. I just needed the space, and I needed the space to own that reality and to go, yep. And then I had my next therapy session, and then I told him she died, and we talked about that. And then I had my next one where I said, and you wouldn't believe it, she got buried on my birthday. And he was just like, of course she did. And it was like, I needed those people around me who I knew would just affirm my decisions. And luckily I've curated my world quite well. All of the people who said things like, oh, a mother would never do that to her daughter are gone. I don't give them space in my world. So I needed that space, and I needed a couple of days to just test. I kept expecting to feel regret. I kept expecting to feel loss. And all I felt was like the threads are finally gone. The threat that she could pop up any second and want my attention again. Or the worst thing she ever did was every single time she saw me as an adult, she apologized for what she did to me. And then she said, but I don't remember any of it. I wasn't there when any of it happened. So, yeah. And she said, I'll let you publish that little book and you say whatever you want because your reality is your reality. And it was like, your reality is your reality is pretty good. But the bit at the beginning where you say, well, you published that little book. Yeah.
You didn't need her permission.
No, I didn't. And I kind of can't believe I waited until after she died to start a podcast because I've been yelling a lot for years. But, yeah. I just gave myself space to let myself be however I was. And it was a surprise for me every day. I'm still kind of surprised that I don't feel regret.
It's advice, and that's advice too for others. Give yourself space. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
curate the people around you that.
Yeah. Connect with people who've had similar experiences, if for no other reason than just so that you've got someone you can talk to who knows. Because really, I can't imagine only having friends who'd had excellent relationships with their mother and then trying to talk about this. I've got this big circle of friends. I call them the Bad Mothers Club. We know because we've all been there. So those are the ones I went to talk about it because they're the ones who know.
Can I ask your opinion on something?
Yes.
How do you? So I heard something today too, and I've been giving it a lot of thought even before. But do you identify yourself as a survivor? Like, is that a word that you feel like you wear like a badge of honor? Or do you feel like that's
some people hate that word? Yeah.
Right. Or do you feel like that's something that I don't want that to be my story anymore?
No, I do identify as a survivor. I've had a lot of conversations with people who I also use the word victim about myself, though. And I know a lot of people who refuse to use either of those words in relation to themselves. I survived this stuff. If I wasn't a survivor, I would be dead, well and truly dead, many, many times over. Um, Sometimes I watch that Survivor show, and I think you guys wouldn't last 5 minutes in my life, some bits of it. Um, yeah. Let's do Survivor where you're just homeless in Sydney instead of on a tropical island. I'm a survivor because you've got to value the superpowers, don't you? You've got to see the things that are most valuable there. And when you live with a constant risk like suicide, sometimes the only thing that gets you through is being a survivor. My house is filled with ridiculous craft projects that I did because I was putting off committing suicide. That's one of the things I do. I'm like, well, I will make this stupid thing. In my kitchen, I have it's a little angel made out of wire. You know how you do those string dolls where you tie them up and you make the legs and things? I made it out of really horrible wire where I must have stabbed myself dozens of times. And it's got these little beaded wings with string. And I made that doll about 20 years ago instead of committing suicide that day. So I'm a survivor, and I've got like evidence of my survival all over my house and my life and my body and things. I have to celebrate it because I haven't traditionally had a lot to celebrate. So you celebrate the things you can. And I know that some people don't like the term survivor and they don't like the term victim because that kind of disempowering element that by saying we're survivors, we're giving over some of our power. Whereas I think being a survivor should be a mark of honor. And it should be seen as a mark of honor. It should be that if you know people who've survived bad shit, stand in awe of them. Look at them and go, you did something that I could never imagine. Um, yeah, I like it. I like it. I'm happy. I might get a tattoo that says survivor. I'll put it next to my feminist killjoy one.
I just, yeah, I just heard a story today. A woman, she was an addict for I don't know how many years, and she had a different perspective of the word survivor, and hers was that I didn't want that to be my story, like and like suffering, and
Yep.
this idea
Yeah.
of let's get
Trying
out
to,
of the suffering and let's
yeah,
get into the joy. Let's just work on the joy instead
absolutely.
of
And that's
yeah.
part of it. Like people talk about tragedy porn and trying to avoid just your entire life being a story of tragedy, which is, I talk about the tragedy and the bad stuff, but I try to talk about the good stuff as well. And I don't want being a survivor to be the only thing I've done, but I never want to forget that it is something that I've done. Um, mm,
And it's we have both, right? In society,
yeah,
in our human experience.
yeah,
You know, you don't have to have traumatic physical experiences for something to be or feel traumatic or to
no,
feel like you're a survivor of something.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just, I'm going to add that as a question.
I think that bit where I was talking before about the superpowers, that's it. Like I can celebrate being a survivor because I can identify the superpowers I got from what I survived. So I can
Yeah,
celebrate
it's
my strengths.
deeper. I
Yeah,
think it's going deeper than just this identity, right?
yeah. Well, when I get to talk about surviving, it means I inevitably get to talk about how strong and powerful surviving made me. So it's kind of that flip side. Yeah.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Because this really just drives me nuts. What are your thoughts when you hear people say that children are resilient?
Oh, I hate the word resilient. Oh God, I hate the word
Same.
resilient. Oh, it is so shaming. I keep hearing it from our politicians here where they're like, our country's been on fire, then we had some floods, and now we've got COVID. They're like, you just need to be more resilient because that's what we're saying instead of let's talk about suicide. Oh my God, children don't need to be resilient. No one needs to be resilient. If you are, resilience should not be our natural state. Resilience is a
Thank you.
response to stress and
Yes.
dysfunction. And I don't know if anyone's noticed, but when you put kids under stress for too long, their brain chemistry changes and they end up with superpowers and celebrating being survivors. We don't want our children to have to end up with superpowers and celebrate being survivors. So we're not going to force our children to be resilient. I firmly believe that every child deserves to have a period of their life where they're not under stress. I cannot imagine what that would be like. But imagine if you did. Imagine if you just woke up every day knowing you were secure and loved. Whoa. Children don't need to be resilient. And now, when the entire world is falling apart and we're taking bits of their future away from them just because of, how capitalism treats things like illness, now is not the time to tell them to be resilient. When we say to these kids, you need to be resilient, we are shifting the responsibility for what the world we've made them. We're saying, well, now this is your responsibility. You deal with all the crap we left you. Just be resilient. It'll be fine. No, I hate the word resilient. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Amen.
and our Prime Minister keeps saying, our kids, you don't need to be anxious. We're looking after things.
Yeah,
he says that about climate change. We're gonna hit our climate targets by pretending we hit them 10 years ago and just making up these climate credits. And he's saying to the teenagers, just don't be anxious, okay? He took a lump of coal into Parliament and hugged it on the floor of the Parliament. And he's saying to the teenagers, don't be anxious. Yeah, it's an insult. It's awful. Teenagers, rise up, rebel, burn us all, tell us to piss off and make the world in your own way.
With your creativity.
Exactly.
Amen, creativity. No, and I think it came up not that long ago in another podcast episode I did where I've heard it so much lately, especially with COVID and everything. And it's like, kids are so resilient. They bounce back. I mean, I heard that around me, like in my personal experience, what I went through. And it's like kids that you're saying that about did not choose to be resilient.
No one.
Not something they chose. If you catch yourself saying that they're resilient, that child is resilient, they're in an experience that they did not choose.
Yep. Yeah. And no one in year 2 says, oh, yeah, I want to be resilient when I grow up. They want to be best.
Right?
They don't want to be resilient. Yeah.
Yeah. I love this episode. I love this interview.
It's been good, hasn't it?
Very rich. Very rich. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
They can find me on Facebook. If you search for my group, Deboning Power Podcast, you can find me there. I even share myself sometimes. I also have my podcast, which is Deboning Power, and that seems to be pretty much everywhere where you can get podcasts. You can find that one. I'm not going to give people my address because this is the internet.
Well, put links.
My book you can get anywhere. It's in audiobook form. The performer who does me does a remarkable impersonation of me. She's excellent. It's also available in ebook and in beautiful, sexy paper form. And they will send it to you in America on either Booktopia or what's the other one that's got books?
Is it on Amazon?
It might be on Amazon, but Booktopia ships internationally, I think, or the Book Depository, one of those two.
Okay. Send me a link. I'll put it in the show notes.
Fabulous.
Anything
so nice
else?
Talking to you.
Anything else you'd like to share?
No.
Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts. Love yourself. Love yourself. Give yourself the love that other people could give you. Even if you are loved by everyone in your world, still love yourself. But if you've got no one and nothing, give yourself love because you deserve it. Yeah, you deserve it.
I heard when as a kid, I think my dad would always say this, something about I have to think on this. If you want a helping hand, look to the end of your own arm.
yes. 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 Mm,
Yeah.
I like that. I like
You
that
were
one.
your own hero.
Yes. We all can be.
We all can be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.
Mm.